My mom tried to cut me out of the family inheritance after I funded their lives for years. So I took it all and left them with nothing. My name is Evelyn Harper, and at 35, I've achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. I'm a successful corporate lawyer, specializing in estate law. I put myself through law school, worked my way up the ranks, and built a reputation as one of the sharpest minds in the field. And yet, in this house, none of that matters. Evelyn, darling, there you are. My mother's voice, saccharine sweet, floats down from the grand staircase. Margaret Harper, the matriarch of our family, descends like a queen addressing her subjects. Behind her, my brothers Daniel and Scott trail like obedient puppies. The sight would be comical if it weren't so infuriating. Mother. I greet her with a practiced smile. Daniel, Scott. How lovely to see you all. Daniel, at 41, still has the boyish charm that's gotten him out of trouble his entire life. He flashes me a grin that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Little sister. Finally tore yourself away from the office, huh? Scott, 38 and perpetually restless, barely acknowledges me. His eyes are already darting around, probably looking for the nearest drink. I came as soon as I could. I reply, my tone carefully neutral. Your message sounded urgent, Mother. Is everything all right? Margaret waves a bejeweled hand dismissively. Oh, you know how it is, dear. Family matters. Come, let's have tea in the solarium. We have much to discuss. As we make our way through the house, I can't shake the feeling that something is off. The air is thick with tension, and the sideways glances my brothers keep exchanging set my nerves on edge. Years of reading body language and high-stakes negotiations have honed my instincts. And right now, they're screaming that I'm walking into a trap. Little do they know, I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. In the game of family politics, I may have been underestimated, but I've always been the best player. And today the real game begins. The solarium has always been my favorite room in the house. As a child, I would curl up here with a book, basking in the warmth of the sun and dreaming of a world beyond these gilded walls. Now, as I take my seat across from my mother, the room feels more like an interrogation chamber. Margaret pours tea with practiced grace, the fine china clinking delicately. Evelyn, darling, she begins, her voice dripping with false concern. We've been worried about you. All this focus on your career. It's not healthy for a woman your age. I resist the urge to roll my eyes. We've had this conversation 100 times before. I'm quite happy with my life, Mother. My work is fulfilling. But at what cost? Daniel chimes in, leaning forward with feigned brotherly concern. You're working yourself to the bone, Evie. No husband, no children. Don't you want more? The patronizing tone sets my teeth on edge, but I keep my expression neutral. Not everyone wants the same things, Daniel. Some of us find purpose outside of marriage and family. Scott snorts, not even trying to hide his disdain. Purpose? Come on, Evelyn. You push papers around all day. It's not like you're changing the world. I'm about to retort when Margaret interjects, her voice suddenly sharp. That's quite enough. Evelyn, the reason we called you here is, well, there's no easy way to say this. We're concerned about your future. A chill runs down my spine. My future? Margaret nods, her expression a mask of motherly concern. Yes, dear. You see, your father and I always intended for the family estate to be divided equally among our children. But given your unique situation, we've had to reconsider. The world seems to tilt on its axis. Reconsider. I repeat, my voice barely above a whisper. It's for your own good, Evie, Daniel says, his tone sickeningly sweet. You're so independent, so capable. You don't need the burden of managing the family assets. Scott nods vigorously. Exactly. We're just looking out for you, sis. This way, you can focus on your career without any distractions. I sit there stunned, as the full weight of their words sinks in. They've cut me out. My own family has decided that I'm not worthy of my inheritance, simply because I dared to forge my own path. As they continue to speak, their words washing over me in a tide of false concern and thinly veiled greed, a cold anger begins to build in my chest. They think they've won, that they've finally put me in my place. But they've made a fatal mistake. They've underestimated me for the last time. As I leave the solarium, my mind is already racing, formulating plans within plans. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they're about to learn that in the game of inheritance, I'm not just a player. I'm the master. In the weeks following that fateful meeting in the solarium, I throw myself into my work with renewed vigor. To the outside world, I'm the picture of grace under pressure, the dutiful daughter accepting her family's decision with quiet dignity. But beneath the surface, I'm seething. It's during a late night at the office, as I'm reviewing some old family documents for a client, that I stumble upon something that makes my blood run cold. Tucked away in a folder of seemingly innocuous paperwork is a draft of my mother's will, dated just 3 months ago. With trembling hands, I begin to read. As I suspected, the will leaves the entirety of the Harper fortune to Daniel and Scott. But it's the margin notes that catch my eye. Scrawled in my mother's elegant handwriting are comments clearly influenced by my brothers. Evelyn, too independent, doesn't need the money. DNS will ensure family legacy continues. E's career choice shows lack of family commitment. I feel sick to my stomach. It's one thing to suspect betrayal, another entirely to see it laid out in black and white. But as the initial shock wears off, a cold determination settles over me. This isn't just about the money. It's about years of manipulation, of being undervalued and pushed aside. I stay at the office until the early hours of the morning, meticulously copying every damning document I can find. By the time the sun rises, I have a plan forming. It's risky, potentially career-ending if I'm caught. But as I think about the years of condescension, of being treated as less than my brothers simply because of my gender and my choices, I know it's a risk I'm willing to take. Over the next few months, I become the perfect daughter. I attend family dinners, laugh at Daniel's inane jokes, and listen patiently to Scott's drunken ramblings. All the while, I'm gathering information, identifying weaknesses, and laying the groundwork for my revenge. I learned that Daniel's latest business venture is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, that Scott has gambling debts that would make a lesser man faint, that my mother, for all her airs of control, is becoming increasingly dependent on mood-altering medication. Each piece of information is a weapon, carefully cataloged and stored away for the right moment. They think they've won, that they've finally put me in my place. But they're about to learn a harsh lesson. Never underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose. The beauty of being underestimated is that no one sees you coming. For months, I play the role of the dutiful daughter to perfection. I attend family functions with a smile plastered on my face, laughing at my brother's jokes, and nodding sympathetically at my mother's thinly veiled criticisms of my life choices. All the while, I'm laying the groundwork for their downfall. It starts small. A whispered word here, a strategically placed document there. I use my connections in the legal world to subtly block Daniel and Scott's access to emergency funds, all while encouraging their reckless spending habits. Oh, Daniel, I gush over dinner one night. That new sports car is simply divine. You simply must take me for a ride sometime. He preens under the attention, never suspecting that I've already insured the loan he took out for that very car is about to default. With Scott, it's even easier. His gambling addiction is an open secret in the family, one that everyone politely ignores. I make sure he hears about a sure thing at the tracks, a tip from a reliable source. When he loses big, I'm there with a sympathetic ear and a suggestion for how he can win it all back. But my real masterstroke comes in the form of my mother's declining health. As Margaret becomes more reliant on her medication, more prone to confusion and mood swings, I position myself as the voice of reason. I suggest that perhaps it's time to revisit her will, to ensure everything is in order, just in case. After all, I say, my voice dripping with concern, we wouldn't want there to be any confusion about your wishes, Mother. Especially given Daniel and Scott's recent financial difficulties. The seed of doubt is planted. I watch it grow with a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Part of me hates what I'm doing, hates the person I've become. But then I remember the years of dismissal, of being treated as less than, and my resolve hardens. This isn't just about money. It's about justice. It's about finally claiming my place in a world that has always tried to push me to the sidelines. As I leave my mother's room that night, I catch a glimpse of myself in a gilded mirror. The woman staring back at me is a stranger, cold, calculating, dangerous. For a moment, I wonder if I've gone too far, if the price of my revenge will be my very soul. But then I straighten my shoulders and meet my own gaze. I am Evelyn Harper, and I will not be erased from my own story. Let them call me cold, let them call me heartless. In the end, they'll learn that the real danger was in underestimating me all along. The beauty of a well-laid plan is watching it unfold. Like dominoes lined up with precision, each piece falls exactly where it should, creating a cascade of destruction that's both terrifying and exhilarating to behold. It starts with Daniel, his latest business venture, a tech startup he swore would revolutionize the industry, implodes spectacularly. I may have had a hand in it, subtly steering potential investors away and ensuring that key partnerships fell through. But in the end, it's Daniel's own incompetence that seals his fate. I'm there when he gets the news, of course. The dutiful sister, ready with a shoulder to cry on and a sympathetic ear. "Oh, Daniel," I sigh, patting his hand. "You tried so hard. It's not your fault the market is so volatile." He looks at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Evie, I might need to borrow some money, just to tide me over until I get back on my feet." I give him my most apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, but I'm a bit strapped for cash myself right now. Have you tried asking Mother?" We both know it's a futile suggestion. Margaret's health has been declining rapidly, and with it, her grip on the family finances. I've made sure of that, positioning myself as the responsible one, the only one capable of managing her affairs. Scott's downfall is even more spectacular. His gambling debts catch up with him in a big way, and suddenly he's facing not just financial ruin, but legal troubles as well. I watch from the sidelines as he frantically tries to cover his tracks, each desperate move digging him deeper into a hole of his own making. When he comes to me, wild-eyed and reeking of desperation, I'm ready. "Scott, I'm so worried about you," I tell him, my voice thick with fake concern. "Have you considered getting help? I know a wonderful rehabilitation center." He recoils as if I've slapped him. "I don't need rehab," he snarls. "I need money. You're a lawyer, for God's sake. Can't you do something?" I shake my head sadly. "I'm sorry, but I can't risk my career. Maybe it's time to come clean to Mother about everything." It's the final push he needs. Within days, Scott has fled the country, leaving behind a trail of bad debts and broken promises. As for Margaret, well, that's the crowning achievement of my plan. As her health deteriorates, I become her primary caregiver. I'm there for every doctor's appointment, every late-night crisis. I manage her medication, control her visitors, and slowly but surely, I become the only voice she trusts. It's almost too easy to suggest that perhaps her will needs updating. "After all," I murmur, as I help her into bed one night, "we wouldn't want there to be any confusion about your wishes, especially now that Daniel and Scott are unavailable." She looks at me with cloudy eyes, confusion and fear warring on her face. "You'll take care of everything, won't you, Evelyn? You've always been the responsible one." I smile, squeezing her hand gently. "Of course, Mother. I'll make sure everything is exactly as it should be." As I leave her room, I catch sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman staring back at me is unrecognizable, powerful, unstoppable, victorious. For a moment, I feel a pang of remorse for what I've done. But then I remember years of dismissal, of being treated as less than, and my resolve hardens. This isn't just revenge. It's justice long overdue. The dominoes have fallen, and I'm the only one left standing. The day of reckoning arrives on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves are turning, painting the world in shades of gold and red, nature's own version of a warning sign. How fitting, I think, as I make my way up the long driveway to the family estate. Inside, the atmosphere is tense. Daniel and Scott have returned, summoned by the family lawyer for the reading of our mother's will. They look terrible. Daniel's once pristine suit hangs loosely on his frame, while Scott's eyes dart nervously around the room, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Margaret is there too, wheeled in by a nurse. She looks small and frail in her wheelchair, a shadow of the formidable woman she once was. For a moment I feel a pang of guilt. But then I remember the years of manipulation, of being made to feel less than, and my resolve hardens. The lawyer, a portly man with kind eyes, clears his throat. Shall we begin? What follows is nothing short of a masterpiece, if I do say so myself. The will, carefully crafted over months of subtle suggestions and strategic maneuvering, is a work of art. It starts conventionally enough, with the usual platitudes about family and legacy. But then comes the twist. To my sons Daniel and Scott, the lawyer reads, his voice steady, I leave the sum of $1 each. The room erupts in chaos. Daniel leaps to his feet, his face red with fury. Scott lets out a strangled cry of disbelief. But the lawyer continues, raising his voice to be heard over their protests. To my daughter Evelyn, I leave the entirety of the Harper estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets. The silence that follows is deafening. All eyes turn to me, a mixture of shock, anger, and dawning realization on their faces. I meet their gazes calmly, allowing a small smile to play at the corners of my mouth. This can't be right, Daniel sputters. Mother would never dash. Oh, but she did, I interrupt smoothly. In fact, she was quite insistent about it. Weren't you, Mother? Margaret looks confused, her gaze cloudy. I don't remember. Of course you do, I soothe, moving to stand beside her wheelchair. You were so worried about the boys' recent difficulties. You wanted to make sure the family legacy was protected. Understanding dawns in Daniel's eyes, quickly followed by fury. You manipulative bitch, he hisses. You planned this all along. I meet his gaze steadily. No, Daniel. I simply played the game you started. And I played it better. Scott lunges forward, but I'm ready. With a flick of my wrist, I produce a stack of documents. I wouldn't if I were you, I say calmly. Unless you want these records of your gambling debts and fraudulent business practices to find their way to the authorities. He freezes, the fight draining out of him in an instant. I turn to address them all, my voice clear and strong. For years, you treated me as less than. You dismissed my achievements, belittled my choices, and tried to erase me from this family's legacy. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in pushing me out of your lives. But in doing so, you've lost everything else. With that, I turn on my heel and walk out of the room, leaving behind the ruins of the family that never truly accepted me. As I step into the sunlight, I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of resentment and pain lifting from my shoulders. I am Evelyn Harper, and I have reclaimed my birthright. The game is over, and I've won. The weeks following the will reading are a blur of legal proceedings, frantic phone calls, and thinly veiled threats. Daniel and Scott predictably contest the will. They hire high-powered attorneys, throw around accusations of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. But I'm ready for them. Every move they make I counter. Every allegation they throw, I deflect with a mountain of evidence, carefully collected and meticulously organized over months of planning. It's almost embarrassing how easily their case falls apart. In the end, they're left with nothing but their anger and the bitter taste of defeat. I watch from afar as they spiral, their lives unraveling thread by thread. Daniel, unable to face his failures, retreats into a bottle. Scott disappears entirely, rumors placing him everywhere from Las Vegas to Bangkok. As for Margaret, her health continues to decline. I ensure she receives the best care money can buy, but I keep my distance. The guilt I feel is a constant companion, a weight I've learned to carry. But every time it threatens to overwhelm me, I remind myself of the years of emotional abuse, of being made to feel less than, and my resolve hardens once more. One crisp autumn day, almost a year to the day since the will reading, I receive the call I've been both dreading and expecting. Margaret has passed away in her sleep. The funeral is a small, somber affair. Daniel shows up, bleary-eyed and reeking of whiskey. Scott is conspicuously absent. As I stand by the graveside, watching the casket being lowered into the ground, I'm struck by a wave of emotion, so intense it nearly brings me to my knees. Grief, yes, for the mother I never truly had, for the family we could have been. But also relief, and a sense of finality. The last tie binding me to my old life has been severed. I am free. As the other mourners drift away, I linger by the fresh grave. I'm sorry it came to this, I whisper, not sure if I'm speaking to my mother or to myself. But I couldn't let you erase me. I couldn't let them win. I place a single white rose on the mound of earth, then turn and walk away. Behind me, I leave not just my mother's body, but the last vestiges of the dutiful daughter I once was. Ahead of me lies a future of my own making, unburdened by the weight of familial expectations and old resentments. For the first time in my life, I feel truly completely free. As I drive away from the cemetery, I catch sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me is someone I'm still getting to know stronger, harder, but also more alive than I've ever been. I am Evelyn Harper, heir to the Harper fortune, architect of my own destiny. And my story is only just beginning. A year has passed since I buried my mother, and with her, the last remnants of my old life. The world thinks they know my story. The ruthless daughter who outmaneuvered her brothers and seized control of a family fortune. They whisper about me at society events. Their voice is a mixture of fear and grudging admiration. Let them whisper. They don't know the half of it. What the world doesn't see is the woman behind the headlines. The woman who, free from the shackles of familial obligation and societal expectations, is finally discovering who she truly is. I've thrown myself into philanthropy, using the Harper fortune to fund scholarships for underprivileged women in law and business. It's my way of ensuring that other girls won't have to fight as hard as I did to be taken seriously in a man's world. But it's not all charity galas and board meetings. In the quiet moments, when the world falls away, and I'm left alone with my thoughts, I often find myself reflecting on the path that brought me here. Do I regret what I did? It's a question I grapple with daily. The guilt is there, a constant companion that I've learned to live with. But so is the knowledge that I did what I had to do to survive, to thrive in a world that was determined to keep me small. Daniel and Scott are distant memories now. Last I heard, Daniel had checked himself into rehab, finally facing the demons he'd been running from for so long. Scott surfaced briefly in Singapore, only to disappear again. Part of me hopes they're finding their way, learning to stand on their own 2 feet the way I had to. As for me, I'm learning too. Learning to trust, to open myself up to the possibility of genuine connections. I've started dating again cautiously. He's a kind man, a fellow lawyer who sees me for who I am, not for my family name or my bank balance. It's new and fragile and terrifying, but for the first time in my life, I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable. Today, as I stand in my office overlooking the city, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. The view from up here is spectacular, the city sprawling out before me like a kingdom I've conquered. But it's not the external trappings of success that bring me joy. It's the knowledge that I am finally unapologetically myself. I am Evelyn Harper, daughter, sister, heiress, survivor. I've faced betrayal, fought battles both external and internal, and emerged victorious. The path I walked was dark and twisted, paved with difficult choices and painful sacrifices. But it led me here, to this moment of clarity and self-realization. As I turn away from the window, my eye catches on a small photo frame on my desk. It's an old picture, faded and creased, my father and me, taken just weeks before his unexpected death. I'm a gangly teenager in the photo, all awkward limbs and braces, but my eyes are shining with determination. I pick up the frame, running my finger gently over my father's face. "I did it, Dad," I whisper. "I made my own way. I hope you'd be proud." Setting the photo down, I straighten my shoulders and head for the door. There's work to be done, a legacy to build. My story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. And this time, I'm the one holding the pen.